welcome everyone to this new webinar by DigiShares on real estate tokenization and regulations, 2023 edition. Every month or so, we organize a webinar on a topic relevant for people interested in real estate tokenization. And this month, we're very lucky to have a great lineup of top lawyers in their jurisdictions on the topic. And so before we get started, a intro message by our CEO, Claus Skanning.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming here today. It's a pleasure to welcome the excellent speakers here today, especially Henzie, that I did a masterclass with yesterday in Dubai. The focus is on regulation, and it's something that we are exposed a lot to. We have more than 150 plus clients in 40 plus countries. So we see a lot of regulatory challenges on a daily basis. Our clients always engage a legal firm. It's a requirement for us to work with them to make sure that we are compliant. Some jurisdictions, of course, fully support tokenization, similar to the US. Other jurisdictions have introduced special legislation that have actually, in some cases, made it harder to tokenize because a special treatment for tokenization, like Liechtenstein, Malta, Germany, and so on. Others have elements that are hard to digitize, such as the share stamp duty tax, that also makes any kind of digitization quite hard. But all in all, global regulation is moving in the right direction. And we are actually doing, I think, what the regulators want. We are introducing a new and more efficient infrastructure for working, facilitating, transacting with securities. The SEC in the US would prefer everything to be securities, so we are doing exactly what they like. On the DigiShares side, briefly, we have lately seen an uppeak in interest for tokenization. So maybe the last 12 months of sort of crypto window is starting to come to an end. We certainly see a lot of interest here after the summer holidays. Many firms coming to us to request their own tokenization platform. We have recently integrated with Wallet and Stripe, so we can support fiat-based payments globally. We have integrated with Wallet Connect, so we can support Coinbase, Binance, Firefox wallets, and many others. And we are going to many events. Last week in Vegas, this week in Dubai, next week in London. And we are generally very active and out there both online and physically. The major news on our side is that we are soon launching our exchange, realestate.exchange, with an expected launch date in Q4 this year in the US, in a collaboration with Texture Capital, where we basically operate under their broker-dealer and ATS licenses. So that will be quite exciting. We are right now currently looking for the first assets to list together with the launch. The other major news is that we have launched a Republic campaign in order to raise funding for DigiShares. We wanted to do it this way to enable retail investors to participate and sort of democratize the access to investment into one of the players in the tokenization space. So the campaign is live right now in Republic for reservations only. We'll launch for real within, I think, 10 days or something like that. So that's it from my side. Feel free to reach out to us if you have questions about tokenization, and I hope that everyone will enjoy the legal discussions in the seminar or webinar today. Thank you.
Thank you, Claus. Very exciting stuff. So just as a reminder for participants, you can ask questions to speakers. So if you do want to, please ask the question in the Q&A section of Zoom and indicate the name of the speaker you're asking the question to, or if it's just a general question. All right, so let's get started. And first, we have Axel von Goldbeck from Germany. So Axel, please, the floor is yours. Please introduce yourself and go ahead with your presentation.
Good. No one can see me still. Anyway, let's start. We have a tight schedule. Thank you very much for having me here. I'm a lawyer with a German law firm called MÖHRLE, who has a crypto department and a crypto tax department, which is very valuable. And I'm delighted that I get the opportunity to speak again in this webinar. Let's jump right into it. I will provide you with a little background to the mere technical regulatory issues, which may be very dry, but you need to understand it in the context of the German real estate market. I mean, as most real estate industries, the German real estate industry is pretty conservative on digitization. So even the central digitization is not going fast. And even under favorable market conditions, investments are, well, changing, I would say. Now, market conditions have deteriorated considerably, as I think everywhere in Europe, due to the interest rate increases. And this is lowering the prospect for ambitious digitization and tokenization projects a little bit, I think, a little more. So to wrap it up, the first 2 bullet points is if times are good and there's plenty of money in the pockets, they think they don't need digitization, and if there's no money in the pockets, they can't afford it. It's some sort of reality in the German market. Still, we are moving on the offering side of tokenization products. The Fabri industry report reports that Germany has 15 products. I'm not aware of any more, actually. I'm a little surprised that we have that many. Product means companies offering tokenization products, or blockchain use cases, I would say generally. Data is scarce as usual. We can rely on the German Supervisory Office crypto securities list, which now lists 557 offerings, of which perhaps 15% are real estate related. So these are mostly very small offerings, but the number is rising slowly. I'll come back to that. On the demand side, and I mean, this is crucial. Of course, the offerings are there, but I doubt that they are being signed in full, at least, and the demand side is completely opaque. And I can't tell you how many companies really, or investors invest in tokens, in real estate tokens, in fact. So this is something we have to sort out better a little bit. Talking about tokens, in Germany, predominantly security tokens are being issued. We have to distinguish between the old, I would say, unregistered security tokens, and the new, meaning under the new legislation, the German Electronic Securities Act, the new security tokens, which are more modern. We have mostly security tokens. We have to distinguish between the old unregistered security tokens and the new registered security tokens, which can be issued under the German Electronic Securities Act, which is a regulation not directed at the real estate market, but at the securities market in general. Under the German Electronic Securities Act, which was enacted in 2021, only debt and fund certificates are allowed. But I haven't seen any fund certificate, actually. I've seen a number of security tokens, as I said. Due to general, and this is what Claus mentioned correctly, at least for the German market, equity tokens, as of today, cannot be issued because the limited liability company shares have registration requirements which stand in the way of tokenization. Stock is basically the same. They don't need to be registered in a register, but there are other obstacles. Still, the German legislator plans to enact a crypto share legislation in 2023. So almost 99% of the German shares are, meaning bond and equity, are covered by proper legislation by the end of the year, hopefully. What we do not have in Germany is fractionalized property, meaning title tokens. Again, in Germany, for a title, you need to be registered in the land register, and this formal requirement stands in the way of real tokenizations. Of course, you can always offer a token on a piece of property, but it's not directly linked to the property. And if you transfer the token, the property remains where it is, basically, unless you provide for very complex agreements. We don't see many other tokens, utility tokens, in the real estate space. So we have, of course, some sort of regulation for this, but in fact, there is no market as far as I can see it. What are the regulatory requirements? As I said, Germany introduced the Electronic Securities Act already 2 years ago. This is not exclusive. You can always issue unregulated security tokens if you like to. The Securities Act was limited to bonds and fund certificates, as I said. Oops, I'm sorry. And the core of the whole regulation is a registration, either central or decentralized securities register, which is mandatory. And yeah, this has some implications for the whole infrastructure of tokenization in Germany, which I will come back to. The German legislator was busy with implementing the crypto register regulations in more detail and the fund certificate regulations. So it spent most of the time in doing that last year. But now it's in place, basically, and the market is picking up. Crypto share legislation is in process, as I said, expected to come in force in 2023. It's basically just an extension of the Electronic Securities Act for shares. So there's the registration obligation and all the other infrastructure regulations is already in place. Yeah, I mean, this is just the paperwork that has been done. Still, we need registers, we need custody services, and we need securities custody service and crypto custody services. And the market is still about to build that. All of these services, which are necessary at least for professional investors, right? You can always hold your token in your own wallet, of course, but if you want to have it held by a professional custody service, the custody service needs a license, the crypto securities register needs a license, and the crypto custody services, which are only allowed to care for the keys, not for the tokens, but for the keys, they all need license as well. So you get an impression of how much work is possible to apply for all this license to meet the requirements. So we have the crypto security custody services, we have the registers, which are all working under grandfathering rules, but it's still a work in progress. And of course, this is not good for professional investors who want to see a ready infrastructure. There are, of course, the lawyers amongst us all know that we have MiCAR. MiCAR is something for non-security tokens, which may exist in Germany, as I said, not at large scale. MiCAR has not been surprising for the German market because it basically reflects the German style of regulating tokens, which means that everybody who's dealing with tokens need a license, as a general rule at least. This has been the case in Germany for some time already, so German market participants are used to that. and see it as a benefit in expanding now to the European market under MiCA licenses, because they have already acquired some experience with regulations. There are exemptions for NFTs, but we don't have it in Germany as far as I know. There is an unregulated space for DeFi, which is often seen as a loophole. But I can tell you that our supervisory authority, the BaFin, will monitor very closely if you appear in the German market, if it's really a DeFi solution or it's just a pretended DeFi solution. And I think we have seen solutions which pretend to be DeFi, but if you trace it back to the roots, you see, well, there is a central element in it. And if there is an identifiable operator of a DeFi system, the BaFin will always hold it accountable. Yeah, that's basically it. So I think I kept pretty much in time. I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Axel. We'll, I guess, have a bunch of questions in the fireside chat at the end. But I guess for now, we'll move on with the next panelist, Aurélien Hollard from CMS Luxembourg. The floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, and thanks a lot as well for having me for this webinar. Of course, real estate tokenization is an important topic in Luxembourg. You all know that Luxembourg has shown quite a strong interest in being a pioneer in the integration of blockchain technology, notably in the financial sector. And that's the reason why, since already 4 years, we have what we call blockchain laws. So blockchain law number 1 was passed in 2019 and enables a securities account to be operated on the blockchain or any other DLT technology. 2 years later, we had another blockchain law, so blockchain law number 2, which enabled the issuance of dematerialized securities and the operation of such register directly on the blockchain. And that allowed, under Luxembourg law, the possibility to issue native tokens at the level of companies. And more recently, actually this year, we have published blockchain law number 3, which notably allows for the registration of collateral directly on DLT. And all those 3 blockchain laws provide quite big flexibility in the legal and regulatory landscape in Luxembourg to facilitate the operation of securities on DLT. And why is it important for real estate tokenization? Is because maybe unless other countries, Luxembourg is really a hub. It's a financial hub, mostly for alternative investments and real estate in particular. And most of the structures which are being set up out of Luxembourg and being tokenized are shares, are securities. So when we tokenize real estate in Luxembourg, it's always intermediated through companies which then issue tokens, so native tokens or other type of tokens, and those tokens then do benefit from the blockchain laws because they are deemed as well to be security tokens. So that is very relevant for the Luxembourg environment, and that's why we have seen a number of use cases being developed in Luxembourg, mostly through a securitization vehicle or property companies, where they were acquiring real estate assets and in a back-to-back scenario, issuing tokens to the investors so issuing basically shares or debt securities, which were then tokenized. Most of the use cases are relying on that intermediate structuring, so through company, whether securitization vehicle or investment funds. Still, although it's possible now, thanks to blockchain law number 2, to issue native tokens and to have the tokens dematerialized and operated on the blockchain from day one. So the securities themselves being the token. It's still more frequent that we face what we call mirroring tokens, so which are more the tokenization of proof of ownership, as it is still cheaper to put in place that type of token than the native tokens, which in the Luxembourg ecosystem is requiring that the financial institution is dealing with the registry of the native tokens, and that has an additional cost element. So unless there is a strong premium from the sponsor or initiator of the real estate tokenization to invest in native tokens, then most of the market remain under a mirroring solution, which is cheaper and can be dealt with of course tokenizers. There are, of course, challenges on those structures. So, and I think the key challenge is about distribution, because when initiators are coming to Luxembourg, usually they want. So again, Luxembourg being an international hub, they are looking for at least pan-European distribution, if not worldwide distribution of the tokens, and that is coming with a number of challenges, because, as said, the way it is being structured in Luxembourg is through a company. So the tokens are securities, are then financial instruments, freely tradable. And you have in Europe a regulation about, a prospectus regulation about the offering of those financial instruments. And except if you accept to make your offer regulated by the regulator, in Luxembourg, the CSSF, what you are looking for is usually to have your offer remaining exempted, so that you can offer your tokens without having a pre-approval process with the regulator, which can be cumbersome and add an additional cost element. So which is very relevant if you have a high amount, high volume, but is not so relevant if the project is just about a couple of millions or even a couple of dozens of millions. So that's why most of the offerings which are being done for real estate tokenization are exempted offerings, meaning that if they are targeting retail investors, then they must target a limited number of retail investors, not more than 149 person per member state, or they need to have a minimum denomination of 100K to ensure that those offerings will remain exempted, which usually is not what is being expected by the initiators, because if they look for tokens, they want something which could be subscribed by retail investors with a smaller amount of money, 100 euros, 1,000 euros, it depends, but as little as possible. Or there is another exemption, which is the one which is mostly used, is when the offering in total is less than 5 or 8 million over a 12-month period, then you do not need to be registered to be regulated neither. So that's let's say most of the use cases in Luxembourg are relying on those solutions. It's still not that easy though, because if you even pursue those real estate tokenizations with an exempted offering, and that technically speaking, you have no liability towards regulators because you are fully non-regulated. The regulators still take a conservative view, saying that they still remain entitled to issue warnings about financial products targeting, investor protections, and they tend to investigate even non-regulated offering and non-regulated projects. So that's why it's quite still important to keep a high standard when it comes also to exempted offerings. Another option is to go for regulated offerings. So here you do not have any limitation in terms of investors or maximum per investor or per country or over a given period of time. And on top of that, you also benefit from distribution marketing passport. So you can passport your product. So your tokenized your tokens on the real estate projects throughout Europe. So that's very convenient. However, you need to have it approved by the regulator in such case. And that is a more cumbersome process, can take a couple of months. And on top of it, you need to be ready to disclose a lot of information to the regulator about the project, the underlyings, and sometimes our clients wish not to share all that information to potential competitors. And you also, and that's most important in terms of real estate, you must as well ensure you have valuation of the assets, which are the underlying of the issuance of tokens. So you must have the valuation done by usually a Big Four or other valuation firms, and that also add quite significant costs to the issuance. So that's why, for all those reasons, still most of the time, based on our experience of the market and what we do with our clients, we are working on mirroring token solution, targeting exempted offering. But again, as mentioned, there is an important point of attention from the regulator on those products. So it's important to remain very cautious and to frame and shape those projects in the best manner possible. I guess that's how the market is developing so far. And I think in the context of Luxembourg, it has helped already to try to democratize access to real estate through fractional ownership, which are being, as said, done in an intermediate manner through companies. Sometimes we see as well projects which are more targeting the usage than the property, trying to rely more on the utility token approach than a property token approach, and in that sense, to a certain extent, try to avoid falling under financial regulation, but more, as it will be the case soon under MiCAR, to have probably a lighter environment. So there are a couple of projects which are quite innovative in that sense. So splitting property acquisition and usage rights on the property. Still challenges around that, and that has been mentioned by my colleagues, but finding the right service providers, custodian, and so on. But I think the market is now adapting, and we find a relevant provider for it. And the last one, which is a very key one, and I think a key concern of all players, is about liquidity. So those projects fail to offer liquidity by themselves, or they put in place a secondary market, or they try to partner with the secondary market already in place to ensure that investors, holder of tokens may get that liquidity on the secondary market for secondary transactions, so not from the issuer itself, but from new potential investors. And I think that's quite key for those projects to develop in the future, because of course, as it sounds quite techy, you still have a fair number of subscribers to those tokens with their real estate underlying. But at some point, liquidity is really key for the investors, and is also, in a way, key for the regulators. Even if those projects are non-regulated, regulators are very sensitive to the capacity of retail investors to be able to exit their investment. And of course, even if it's linked to real estate, it's not as liquid as if you had, your own property that you could sell on the market. Although with today's environment, you could still say it's challenging to sell a property. So selling a token is also very challenging, but selling property is, of course, as well now. So that's what I had to say on tokenization in Luxembourg. It's still a very dynamic and innovative environment, but facing some issues. And I think if you go for those kind of projects in Luxembourg, you have to know what you're going to face. You have to know why you go there and what you will have to face, because financial regulation is likely to apply to you. And as said, it comes with a number of restrictions when it is distributed to retail investors. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Aurélien. So I see some questions in the Q&A. We'll save them for the fireside chat, and move on to the next speaker for now. So we have Maurice Crespi over from South Africa. Maurice, please, the floor is yours.
Great, thanks so much. Yes, thanks, Gabriel, and thanks to the audience. Thanks to my fellow panelists for this opportunity. Thank you, Claus. I'm an attorney at Schindlers Attorneys. I've been at Schindlers Attorneys for 25 years. We decided to begin exploring blockchain in 2017. We opened the first blockchain department back then. But it was about 3 years ago that we decided to really look into what we term the convergence of tech and law. And what we mean by that is tech, in our minds, has hit a stage where attorneys have to rise up, and they're really got to be there for the techies. So mindful of that, what we decided to do is to not be your regular law firm. We decided to actually start employing techies who would work alongside us. And that's what we've been doing for the last 2 years. And what we've discovered is that from the tech side, that's relatively simple. We love DigiShares. DigiShares is a great platform, but the headache really begins when it comes to legislation and regulation. And we began exploring ways and means to actually list tokens, to list whole properties as tokenized assets under the existing regulatory framework. Now, what's important here is there are two frameworks in South Africa, and I think the same applies in most jurisdictions around the world. You have the framework in relation to crypto assets. In South Africa, we have the notion of a crypto asset service provider, and they're regulated. And what they're really regulating there is crypto as a store of value. Bitcoin, the actual crypto is a store of value. What's not necessarily regulated by the crypto regulations are crypto as a representation of value. When it comes to the tokenization of real-world assets, that's what we're talking about, crypto as a representation of value. And where the real difficulties come in is with legacy legislation and regulations. So in South Africa, we have the Companies Act, we have the Financial Markets Act, we have the Financial Sector Regulations Act, we have the Collective Investment Schemes Act, and we have more. And that legislation has been in place for some time, and we found that the real headache lies in that legislation. What we sought to do was to see whether we could find ways and means to tokenize outside of financial market regulation and the crypto regulation. By no means are we suggesting that crypto or real-world asset tokenization should not be regulated. In fact, what we're doing is we are self-regulating, and we are regulating in the sense that there are certain circumstances where you don't have to actually be regulated, you don't have to apply for a license, but we are advising clients to do so in any event. Now, we started by saying, what if we take a DigiShare platform, get a public company, buy a real estate asset, put in the public company, and list the shares on the DigiShare platform. Now, the DigiShare platform, as it happens, is perfect when it comes to the regulations in relation to share registers, and it complies 100% with that. We got excited with that. There's regulations there, and we can list a company. Wow, that's great. However, one then turns to the Financial Markets Act, and one soon discovers that to do so, you would have to register as a stock exchange. As a Johannesburg Stock Exchange, as any other stock exchange, you'd have to go through that exercise. So we hit a wall there. We can't register a public company and simply register the shares and tokenize them. Then we thought, what about debt instruments? Let's have a look at debt instruments. And we looked at the Financial Markets Act, and we looked at the concept of debt instruments there. And they said bonds and debentures in public companies are defined as securities. So we naturally got excited, thinking, well, here we can tokenize debt instruments in private companies. Unfortunately, when we looked further, we found that in terms of the Financial Sector Regulations Act, we'd need to be licensed to do that. And then we had the Collective Investment Schemes Act. We said, what if we start a fund and we tokenize the fund? The Collective Investment Schemes Act would kick in, and you would be subject to that, and you'd have to be licensed in terms of our collective investment scheme legislation. So we've narrowed it down, and when it comes to the asset tokenization, real estate asset tokenization in South Africa, we have found a way of doing it outside of the regulations that I mentioned. And it's a gap that we found in our law. We're not certain it's going to last very long, because there is a bill in its current form. It will regulate this current legal framework, but that will probably happen in about 3 years' time. But I think this will also inspire some thought in relation to my colleagues and those out there to really consider, options such as this. And what we discovered is, if we were to register a single asset private equity investment fund, and importantly, it's going to be a single asset, because the moment you have more than one asset, it becomes it becomes subject to the Collective Investment Schemes Act, because it falls within the definition of portfolio. And these structures can be set up either by way of a limited partnership, alternatively as a Bevint trust. And if you were to set up, let's say, a limited partnership, and you were to register a property in the name of that limited partnership, and it's possible to do that, you'd have the general partner who would be liable, and then you'd have the secret partners. And the secret partner's interest in the partnership can in fact be tokenized and can be transferred, which means that you can take an entire property and you'd be in a position to actually register it in that partnership, and the interest can be transferred together with the associated actual rights in that property. The problem with that, though, is the moment you transfer the token in the property in those circumstances, it attracts tax, transfer duty, and other taxes associated with the transfer of properties. And we've overcome that. And I won't get into that now, but there are ways and means to do that. So at the moment, what we're doing when it comes to real estate tokenization is we're taking on a whole host of models. We are creating debentures or bonds that are held in a partnership as a single asset partnership. That bond gets registered and is administered by the general partner in the partnership. And the bond can be a fixed coupon if you want to raise capital for the property. it can be variable, it can be a profit share bond, and we've created what we refer to as a flip bond, where you tokenize a property, you democratize it, you mint 1 million tokens, you distribute those 1 million tokens, each one representing an interest in the partnership. The property gets flipped, gets sold, it's bought now, it gets sold in 3 years' time, and the profit then gets distributed to the limited partners. We can do that with really any asset. It's not limited to tokenization. There's some assets outside of, not tokenization, real estate tokenization. The other opportunities there when it comes to securities, when it comes to equities, you can obviously do quite the same there. So what we've essentially achieved in doing that, and incidentally, just going back to regulation, when it comes to the partnership structure, it's not certain how it will be regulated in about 3 years' time. When we expect that bill that I made mention of, when it comes in the form of an act, we believe that in a structure like that, either in a Bevin trust structure, will have to happen as the general partner will actually have to be licensed as a financial service provider or something along those lines. They'll either be the trustees in the trust or the general partner in a partnership, in a limited partnership that would require registration. But as matters stand now in South Africa, that's not necessary. Interestingly, you can still take 1 million tokens and you can still take a structure like that. And if one individual holds the 1 million tokens, well, they own the entire property and they can transfer the entire property by transferring those tokens. Now, in those circumstances, it can never, ever be contended that that is a security. However, the moment that you start fractionalizing and there's a expectation of profit very similar to the how we test in the United States, as a result of the efforts of others, it becomes a security. So the moment you take that property and you start generating revenue off the back of that property, it becomes a security. I see I'm out of time. Yeah, or do I still have 5 minutes? I'm not quite sure. Ashley?
You do have 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay, that's great. On the so just back to what I was saying. What I think is important when it comes to this kind of tokenization is credibility. And what we're achieving now, as I mentioned, what we're doing is we, as a law firm, are in fact using the DigiShare platform for the purpose of tokenization. So we're a one-stop shop. You come to us, you have an asset. We not only advise on the appropriate structure, but we actually provide the tech solution through the platform, such as the DigiShare platform. I want to mention a few projects that we're presently involved in on the real estate side and possibly the difficulties that we've encountered there. Now, the first difficulty and the most important one, I think there was a question in the group, and that's really around KYC. If you're going to be distributing dividends or returns to token holders out there by way of airdrops, how do you know who they are? In South Africa, we have exchange control regulations. So how do you know that you're not paying somebody outside of South Africa and contravening those regulations? How does one deal with compliance? You could be sending money to a triad in the East or to a gangster somewhere in the world. And those kind of issues are proper deal breaker issues in the sense that if you can't overcome them, well, it ends there and then you're limited to one jurisdiction. And the way we've overcome that is by creating a stable coin that can only be utilized for the purposes of a exchange. And it's got to be in relation to only the repayment of dividends or the return on investments, however you want to refer to it. And the distribution takes place by way of those particular tokens, which means that they can only cash in those tokens through the platform that you use. So the moment you have an ROI distribution and the investor wants to cash in on their gains, they have to go through a single platform within the jurisdiction of South Africa. They can then convert it to fiat, or they can convert it to another currency. At that point, we'll have KYC'd them And if they convert it to another currency, such as USDC or USDT, and they take it overseas, contrary to our exchange control regulations, well, that's a compliance issue with the investor, and it's the investor who actually has to get the authorization. And that's how we've overcome that. So I think I've dealt with one important question there. I do now see that I'm coming very, very close to the end of time. So let's see if there are any questions I can deal with now. No, they're not. That's pretty much a wrap on my side. Thanks so much, Gabriel.
Thank you, Maurice. So we'll move on to the next. Charles Kerrigan and Fiona Henderson from CMS in the UK. Charles and Fiona, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Fiona Henderson. I'm a partner at CMS and specialise in fintech and digital assets. Charles and I are sharing duties on this, so I'll let him introduce himself when we exchange halfway through our script for today. So to kick off just with 3 key messages from us on real estate tokenization from an English law perspective. It can be done, and we're doing it. If you're taking third-party money, there are lots of rules, and we've done deals that have genuinely used the benefit of blockchain. So that's just a backdrop from us. So going back to basics briefly in terms of what tokenization is in England and what the models are, we've got 2 frameworks under English law. We've got native issuance, where the token is the asset. It doesn't represent the asset. And this can seem like an obvious point for those in the crypto space, given all crypto tokens are native tokens. And then we've got the mirroring model, which Aurélien has already mentioned from a Lux perspective. On the English side, the mirroring model, the token represents the ownership of an underlying asset, so a debt instrument or a traditional or a digital asset, and the ownership of that asset is recorded on the blockchain and represented by the issuance of a token. So what then is real estate tokenization in England? So in current practice, the tokenization of real estate is really the tokenization of shares in a company that owns real estate. It doesn't mean the fractionalization of real estate consistent with a couple of the other jurisdictions as well. Although new models that seek to achieve that by effectively tokenizing contracts such as leases rather than title to the property are emerging. And the reason for this is because from a legal perspective in England, we've got land registry rules that provide that no more than 4 owners can be registered in respect of a property title. So that imposes some constraints on us. Therefore, investors invest in shares in an SPV, typically an SPV, set up for the purpose of the transaction that itself owns the real estate. And when we're looking at real estate tokenization and the tokenization of shares in a company that owns that real estate, the test cases that we see here use an English private limited company. And due to the constraints in the Companies Act, so the UK Companies Act, the model that we've got to use is the mirroring model in respect of the economic rights into the shares. So we split the 2 aspects of the shares. We've got legal title and we've got the economic rights, and a separate off-chain register is kept which records which entity, typically a nominee, holds the legal title to the shares, while the blockchain records the investor that owns the economic interest in the shares. And in England, we don't have any specific digital securities legislation or blockchain laws, unlike other jurisdictions. So we are limited to the kind of parameters of the UK Companies Act in respect of the requirements as to shares, because they also apply to tokenized shares. There has been a lot of work carried out here by the English Law Commission and government bodies on the application of our existing framework of law to tokens. And the general view is that it's flexible enough to apply to tokens and tokenized shares without further legislation being required. And a very recent report issued in February this year broadly came to the conclusion that digital securities, so tokenized shares, are more challenging than, say, debt instruments or bonds because of the requirements of our company's legislation. And a fully decentralized and permissioned blockchain or DLT system can't currently be used as the shareholder register, owing to the certain restrictions in our company's legislation on how ownership has to be recorded with respect to legal title. However, a permission system could be, and at the moment there is no recommendation that specific statutory intervention will be required to support new asset classes or financial structures. So turning to the regulatory position, in some ways it's similar to the position under law. So in order to determine whether or not a token is subject to financial regulation, you look at the characteristics and you look at the function of a token. Owing to the fact that the UK financial services regulatory regime is technology neutral. So if we're talking about real estate tokenization, we're talking about the tokenization of shares in an English company. Therefore, we're talking about security tokens, which are regulated. So it's the existing law and the existing regulation as it pertains to the issuance of shares that applies also to tokenized shares. And in terms of what we're seeing in practice, the simplest projects and proof of concept projects are private deals. They rely on exemptions, and generally speaking, they settle in fiat. And Charles is going to talk through kind of broadly three headings that we see projects could fall under from a UK perspective, which is one, a private offer, so no offering to the public. Two, a deal that utilises exemptions. And three, a deal that requires a prospectus.
Thanks, Fiona. So picking up on Fiona's points, I think probably above all, we want to emphasize that there are deals happening. So a lot of the conversation around this is that there are obstacles and difficulties, but we've certainly seen the market has developed over the last few years, as the other panelists have been saying. There has been a lot of substantive work that's taken place between commercial parties, legal practitioners, and also regulators. So the point that I think we want to emphasize for each of our jurisdictions is that generally regulators are open-minded about technological innovation so far as it supports good outcomes for customers. And that's the point here, that if we can use blockchains to provide faster settlement, more novel products, people using blockchains to be able to do different things and create new products because there's more flexibility, there's more technical flexibility. And that's done within safe environments. The anti-money laundering rules are respected and the securities issuance rules are respected, then regulators are generally pretty favorable to it. And we can certainly see that the mood of the markets has been strongly influenced by Larry Fink at BlackRock, the JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs projects. So tokenization is now a very significant topic for the wider financial markets, both buy side and sell side. As Fiona says, people generally don't come to us because they want a lecture on how laws apply to particular fact patterns. They come to us because they have a project in mind and want to be able to implement the project. So if we take the most basic case of something that has the characteristics of a fundraising, in the case of real estate, as Fiona says, that's generally one of the purposes that people bring to us for tokenization. as Fiona describes, we try and identify which type of transaction may be suitable for the project. And this is, as always, looking at the trade-offs between the cost and time to implement versus the benefits of taking that structure. So the greatest benefits, so far as fundraising are concerned, naturally come from an offer which is broadly available to retail investors. But of course, that's in the bucket of requiring a prospectus. Then, as Fiona describes, we've got a middle position where there are still obligations of disclosure, but if the securities are offered to investors that benefit from some sort of exemption, whether it's related to sophistication, accreditation, or their net worth, then we're working within a less constrained environment. So that's quicker and cheaper, but you're putting the securities to fewer people. So the secondary market is always also impacted. And then finally, there are projects where they're essentially private projects. So in the UK, broad terms, issuing securities in a private company is not regulated. What's regulated is marketing those to the public or issuing them to the public. So if you have a private group, then you have a lot of flexibility. And we see a lot of the early projects take that as a lead. So you can relatively quickly and cost effectively do a private project. It may not be where your ultimate ambitions lie, but people work their way through that process and do larger projects as they go on. So how do we do this? We've spent a lot of time building checklists and precedent materials. So to work out where you sit in these various options, we have checklists and decision trees. So we would try and take projects through a process of identifying where they have the ability to do larger scale or more open investment projects, or where that needs to be more constrained. So our approach, and I think our colleagues and peers who are on the line, we're trying to find a way of making a project viable in a cost-effective way. As Aurélien made the point very well, this market is certainly well occupied by international funds because they have sufficient deep pockets to be able to do projects inside the regulatory perimeter and issue a prospectus if that's what's required. So all of the work that I think we're all doing is trying to not tell you what you can't do, but tell you what you can do as someone who comes to that. Interestingly, the rules in the UK, we didn't have restrictions on marketing for crypto tokens in the UK for the last number of years. And there's a change coming through in our rules in a couple of weeks, which will restrict that marketing. So it will put crypto tokens, things like Bitcoin that are listed on crypto exchanges, into the same position as the kind of tokens that we're talking about today. If you have a token backed by or related to real estate, it will inevitably be a security token. I think we'd say there's almost no way around that for a conventional project. But we're seeing the regulators now applying these rules to crypto tokens. So the difference between the markets of security tokens and utility tokens is starting to be shrunk and the two markets brought together. So I think we'll leave it there. We're available for the Q&A and further points, but from our perspective, we'll share some materials. We're just trying to show people what can be done and then guide them in terms of predictability of time and cost and what those benefits are. And in particular, what's interesting is people who are using tokenization to generate new business models. Just to call out one, for example, we worked on a project where tokens are issued to private rental tenants in a particular building development, and that gives them effectively loyalty points and credits. So a credit builder type thing, people paying their rent on time are earning tokens. So it was a way of not providing a project that was going to be highly regulated, because the tenants' tokens are not in any way secured on or providing access to the value of the building, but it engaged them in a token-based economy that the developer was experimenting with in relation to new developments. So there are lots of ways of bringing new models through tokenization to the market. And that's it for the UK. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fiona and Charles. All right, the next speaker is Henzie Healley from the counsel services in the UAE. Henzie, the floor is yours.
Well, thanks, Gabriel, and thank you, Claus, as well, and DigiShares for having me here. Like Claus said, we had a very successful and good presentation together yesterday in Dubai, and it definitely shows that the market is extremely interested in this space and the tokenization of assets. So in order to just kind of set the regulatory landscape, I'm just going to just share a few short slides. While I'm speaking, I think everyone can see this, right? If I could just see what... Okay. Then for some reason, I'm having issues today. Slideshow, there we go. Play from start. Okay, great. So this is just to set a little bit of the scene of how our regulatory landscape works here. And I think what's the most important to focus on is this map on the left-hand side. So out of the entire UAE, we have over 50 different economic free trade zones. And everything outside of an economic free trade zone is what we refer to as mainland. So the mainland, we have a federal authority which governs everybody, but then we have an authority that governs what we call mainland. And then out of these 50 or so economic free trade zones, we have 2 that are financially regulated, and they have their own courts and their own laws, which means that in the UAE, we have a parallel legal system which comes into existence. So you'll see here the DIFC and ADGM, these are the 2 economic free trade zones. So they apply English law, and they also, like I said, have their own courts. Whereas across the rest of the UAE, it's applied, the UAE laws are applied, and that's applied by the UAE courts. And so just to go into a little bit more detail, why I'm setting that scene is because when we talk about the 2 financially regulated free zones, they have their own regulators, which are the DFSA and the FSRA. And then we have the SCA, which is federal, but then in Dubai, we also have a new authority called the Virtual Asset Regulatory Authority, which essentially governs all virtual asset related licenses, including the tokenization of assets or even a token launch in general. It governs all of those activities or those companies that are set up, other than the ones that are in the DIFC, which exists in Dubai. Then just to muddy the waters a little bit more, as if that wasn't complicated enough, out of these 50 or so economic free trade zones, not all of them offer virtual asset related licenses. So each authority, so to speak, or free zone has its own license activities. And so depending on what a client would want to do in the virtual asset space, that would determine what options they had in terms of authorities to set up under. And then depending on where that was, that would then determine which regulatory body essentially had control or authority over them, which would then also dictate the laws that tended to apply. So this is just an overview of the regulatory landscape in the UAE from where we started until where we are now. I won't go through it in detail. I think it's more so relevant on how things are working here at the moment in terms of digitalizing assets. But main points are that it started back in 2016 with crowdfunding. Since then, we've had various free zone authorities that have brought out license activities. The financially regulatory free zone in Abu Dhabi brought out regulations around crypto in around 2016, 2017. And they've built quite a big name for themselves in the OTC space. And then you see the establishment of Dubai's VARA authority in 2013, and then the new blockchain and AI campus, which has been set up by the second financially regulated free zone then in Dubai. And so this is just jumping to the kinds, when we're talking about tokenizing assets, what's actually permitted at the moment and what isn't. So I'll just mention it, and then I'll turn on my video again and just go into a bit more detail about how we're dealing with the regulatory landscape in terms of tokenizing assets. So at the moment, utility tokens are permitted and asset-backed tokens, but at the moment there are no regulations for securities or the tokenization of real estate. And I do realize that there's a bit of ambiguity when we compare, for example, an asset-backed token with a security token or a real estate token. But that's the gray zone that we sometimes like to operate within in the UAE in order to actually make things doable, or to be able to not be restricted by the black and whites of the law. There's these nice little gray zones which are entirely legal, and that's just until the regulations and everything catch up. So at the moment, if we're talking about how do we go about digitalizing assets, so digitalizing assets or tokenizing assets, I shouldn't say digitalizing, tokenizing assets in general is permitted. So it's just the type of license activity. So again, just to take a step back, it's very case by case basis, depending on the project that the client wants to partake in, how they want to provide the project to the public, where they're looking to raise investment from, etc. Because then that will all determine where would be the best place for them to set up, and then essentially what regulations apply. But in general, the tokenization of assets is permitted. It's when we get into the real estate arm that it's doable, but it's not written in paper yet as a method to do it, or that it's permitted. So how people are doing that is to essentially have the property, or in this case you could do assets as well, but it's the property that would be held by an SPV or some sort of other entity, and then those shares then would be essentially tokenized. That would be the gray zone there. In terms of digitalizing assets, again, it depends. Again, why am I saying digitalizing? But tokenizing, when it comes to tokenizing assets, there are ways around it. So depending on how integral this is for the actual business, if this is the whole business of the client, this is just a small part of it. What most people are doing is setting up just a DLT license and then stacking the additional approvals on top. But what we've also found is that there are certain arrangements that can be made with companies such as DigiShares, for example, where if there are the correct agreements in place, then the same thing could be done entirely legally, but then certain parts of those services which are harder to get the approvals for here, the licenses for here, are then carried out by that third party like DigiShares. And even, for example, with the actual token launch, we get into this area where it's probably over-regulated here with some of the authorities, because when you're doing a token launch, it's actually considered a brokerage license, which I think is overplayed, and I think you'll agree to that extent. But the loophole is that if you were working with a company like DigiShares and you got them to actually do the token launch for you outside of the UAE, then that's a way that you could do that, or setting up an entity for the token launch outside of the UAE and then just setting a rep office up here, or something similar in order to promote it. But yeah, so it's very, very case by case basis. There's a solution for everything a solution for everything at the moment, other than the real estate, the tokenization of real estate assets, which like I said, people are accomplishing through the setting up of an SPV or another sort of entity. But we hope that more leeway will be made with that as the regulations here continue to evolve and grow, as it's happening almost on a weekly basis.
Understood. Thank you, Henzie. And maybe as we have a few more minutes, do you have any examples of projects that are happening in the UAE with regards to securities tokenization, or any best practices, advice that you could give to people wanting to tokenize there?
Of course. So I would say, so again, security tokens are not permitted here yet. So even though, yes, when we're talking about tokenizing assets in the sense of what we've been speaking about during this presentation, or tokenizing real estate, it is considered a security anywhere else. It could be considered an asset-backed token or some other form of token here in the UAE with which to do it. But if you're looking to come here and register it as or launch it as a security token, it's not going to work. But that's that lovely gray area where it could still be considered an asset-backed token, and you could do the launch that way.
Understood. Thank you. So I guess we'll move to the next speaker, Gary Romel, who's based in California. Hey, Gary, the floor is yours.
How's it going, Gabriel? Thank you. Thank you.
Good,
and yeah, sorry, it's still a little bit dark here in Monterey. The sun's not quite up yet. Yeah, just a brief introduction. My name is Gary Romel. I practice law in Monterey, California. Before practicing law, I used to fly on AWACS aircraft with the big radar dish. We actually used to look at this kind of code. I had hexadecimal code I had to transcribe for error coding on my aircraft. But anyway, tokenization of real estate. Basically, you know, we've got, I'm a little bit late to the party here, so I apologize if this has been covered, but there's basically three kinds of assets on an accountant's balance sheet: a tangible asset, like real property, an intangible asset, like intellectual property, or a financial asset, like a stock or a bond. Now, obviously, when we're talking about a financial asset, like a stock or a bond, that is a security, right? If I'm starting an SPV to own that real estate, then that is a security in the United States. The direct way to perhaps tokenize it is to take the deed of the land and make that into a smart contract. That's a more direct way, but then again, for liability, somebody wants to own that property, and usually it's an entity for liability purposes. So that option is usually eliminated, as owning the tangible asset is directly tokenizing that tangible asset. So really what we're talking about is tokenizing, digitizing a financial asset in the way of a stock. And here in the US, we've got, you know, basically our C corporations, our LLCs, our partnerships, and then we've got DAO entities, which we'll get to in a minute. When you're talking about an entity and what the token represents, does it actually represent the stock directly, or is it just kind of a carbon copy? So we've got, you know, normally you've got what's called an uncertificated stock that people use, or a book entry share, where it's just kept, the cap table is just kept on a lawyer's or the company's computer in a central database. And so that's the standard way. If we're dematerializing that and we're doing a book entry share, we can do a digitally enhanced dematerialized share, where now we're keeping that carbon copy on the blockchain, and that blockchain copy, if that burns to the ground, it doesn't matter because the carbon copy is on somebody else's computer. Now, if we're talking about a digital asset security, that digital asset or that blockchain token will actually represent directly the stock. So if there's a problem with transferring that, then that's actually a problem for the situation. So I'm trying to get us closer to where we're using a digital asset security, but some clients still prefer enhanced digital securities for that reason. Now, there's a number of states here, and there's two kind of different approaches to this. We've got the DAO entities, the pure DAO entities, where it's actually meant to be a DAO. It's written into the code that it's going to be on the blockchain, and each DAO member gets a vote, gets to participate. And there's states with that. One of the first states to come out with that here was Vermont, followed by Wyoming, which has a DAO LLC, which their legislature has amended last year. And then we've got some new up-and-comers, actually New Hampshire. Their legislature's meeting, I think, as we speak right now on their Bill 645, which mirrors Utah's legislation for the limited liability decentralized autonomous organization, LLD, which is sort of a new form. Utah's will take effect next year. And Utah's law is a little bit interesting because it's a new organization altogether. They didn't try to rework a corporation or an LLC into a new, they didn't try to wedge blockchain into it. They redid it. And in doing so, their code is a little more meticulous in what kind of systems can be used. For example, they don't want a private permission blockchain. They require, the state of Utah will require a public permissionless blockchain like, say, Ethereum, right? And if we're using a system like DigiShares, we can use those kind of systems, and we have choices on what kind of blockchain we want to use, and we can use Ethereum. So Utah will be an interesting state to watch in New Hampshire, and the legislation there sort of mirrors each other, and Utah will take effect next year. The other kind of approach to it is not to use an actual DAO entity, because the traditional management structure in, say, an LLC, where you have a managing member in charge of everything and a bunch of passive membership interests, don't really apply in so far. You can have two different membership classes in, say, a Utah DAO LLC or Wyoming DAO LLC, but that's not the same as having a managing member. So structurally, it's a little bit different. And say in Utah, you can be anonymous, but you need one person's name to be on the bylaws, and they want a legal representative to be appointed. But in states that they don't have a DAO entity, there's a lot of states here passing legislation that still allows the cap table of a corporation or an LLC to be managed on a blockchain. So they're recognizing that this is a very good infrastructure, a digital infrastructure for which entities can be run. So that is very promising. Even states like California here, we just extended our legislation on that. Nevada, Iowa, New Jersey, Delaware has good code in there for the LLCs to be tokenized. So it's really, from my perspective as an attorney, it's looking at where the client is, what their goals are, how they want to manage their entity, what maybe perhaps their tax implications are of what kind of entity, and then going from there. And for me, it's sort of a standard process of, business organization with looking at the tokenization aspect from those different angles in the upcoming states, and then launching that security token and doing the securities law paperwork to notice SEC if it's like a Regulation D, or work with them if it's like a Regulation A or an IPO. Let's see. Oh, I see a question here. I don't think that's for me. But we have very good regulations here as far as certainty on this. I know when I mint a token for an entity that it's a security. So it's not ambiguous as far as the path I need to take to be right with the regulatory entities here. Now, that's not necessarily the case, obviously, with cryptocurrency, and that's an entirely different conversation. And I try to distinguish when I talk to people, cryptocurrency is not a security token. Obviously, this is a room where most people should know that, but it's a very big distinction, because clearly our SEC has been coming for that industry as an investment contract, and they've left Bitcoin alone and Ether alone thus far, but they have still there's still other exchanges and platforms in the crypto world that they're coming for, and they mentioned that yesterday. So we're still not, I still don't like to interface systems as far as accepting cryptocurrency for a security token, because there still could be something that could drop. Are there any questions?
I actually have one on what you just said. Does that include USDC stable coins, for example, or any kind of stable coins? Like, did you see any issue with that? I know that there's no comprehensive stablecoin regulation yet in the US, but it's been used by some. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there is not stablecoin regulation yet. We're waiting on some. The TUMI legislation, they've got some on the House. They're tossing around. Let me see, TUMI. And that, yeah, TUMI, there's a TUMI stablecoin bill. Yeah, April 6, 2022, the Stablecoin Trust Act, which would give us a nice regulatory framework 4 stablecoins, authorizing 3 options for the issuance of payment, subjecting all payment issuers to standardized requirements, and of course, distinguishing stablecoins from securities, indicating a minimum stablecoins do not have interest and are not securities. So they're trying. They're trying.
Thank you. And yeah, I guess given we have a few more minutes before the fireside chat, do you have any examples of projects that are happening in the US and that are being tokenized? Obviously, no need to give names if it's confidential, but just examples of structures that are happening.
Yeah, sure. I mean, kind of as a standard structure that we've been doing, there's, you know, real estate tokenization, obviously commercial real estate. And, you know, for the structure there, people will generally start a C corporation, a USC corporation, and then they'll, you know, spin up multiple SPVs under that C corporation. Be it a DAO LLC. In one particular instance, it was just a regular LLC with a tokenized membership unit.
And I see we just got a question. Is there a structure we can tokenize an asset to mimic equity for renters in a multifamily development?
Yes.
So sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, in a multifamily development. Yeah, you could form, you know, whatever company owns that multifamily development is more than free to issue securities or via tokens to those tenants. You know, and that could be a good system to co-own real estate, you know, as a tenant.
Got it. And I guess it would have to be an exempt offering.
Yeah, it would have to be an exempt offering. Yeah, I mean, you could technically full IPO
yeah,
residential thing, but it might be a little much.
And there's a follow-up question from the same person: is would the developer or the owner retain full control of the building?
Yeah, and that's the question. If it depends on which entity you're using, right? If we're using, say, a corporation, and we have the stockholders, we can give away a common or a preferred stock token. So we can sell, just like a regular corporation, we can sell a piece of voting stock, or we can sell a piece of non-voting stock, and that's fine. And with an LLC, even a DAO LLC, you can have 2 different membership classes, one that controls other things and some that don't. So there's definitely some wiggle room within those structures to still have, you know, managed buildings and corporations that are tokenized.
All right.
And I was
sorry, go ahead, Gary. Yeah, you stopped.
I was going to say, I do have, if anybody, I have a 90-page cryptocurrency and a regulatory tracker update that I'm looking at that I pulled down from my from Reuters here. That's current. It's 90 pages of fun and outlines every single government entity's action against anything. So if anybody's curious for that, you know, drop me a line, drop me an email, and I can send it to you.
Thanks. That sounds like a lot of fun.
It's joyful. It's joyful.
All right. Thank you so much, Gary, for joining so early. I know it's it's almost 7:30 a.m. In California, so really appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks.
So if it's okay with the other speakers, I mean, we can start the fireside chat now, even if we're a couple minutes ahead of schedule. So I'll ask every speaker to please unmute and turn on their camera if they wish to, and join the fireside chat. Well, I guess maybe those that aren't here yet will join in a couple minutes when it was supposed to start. Sorry, there's someone that has their audio on and there's a sound. I don't know who it is, but maybe mute for now. Yeah, I guess so. So let's get started with the fireside chat. I know there was a question by Asim earlier in the chat with regards to ATSs, and if an ATS could be a DEX, or if a DEX could be an ATS. So ATSs in the US are alternative trading systems. They're a type of license that you can get from the SEC to enable you to trade securities on your venue. And so let's broaden the question to all of your jurisdictions. Let's ask, do you think a decentralized exchange could gain the necessary licenses in your jurisdiction to enable the trading of securities? And if so, how? So let's start. Maybe Axel, do you have a view on that?
Yes. Securities trading is still a big topic, of course. Presently, it's not possible to trade securities on any German stock exchange. Still, I'm sure that everybody is preparing for it. It's not a question of regulatory gaps. It's all in place. It's just the technology and the infrastructure that is missing. But with securities, crypto offerings picking up with institutional investors, banks, and financial service providers, I think the stock exchanges are getting more interest in pursuing this. I mean, this is a costly enterprise, of course, and there needs to be some volume in trading. One of the smaller German stock exchanges in Stuttgart is preparing for that. I'm pretty confident that the Frankfurt Stock Exchange, which is by far the biggest in Germany, is preparing as well. But if you ask me, as of to date, crypto securities trading is not possible. Not for regulatory reasons, but just because the technology is not in place.
Thank you, and maybe let's go to Henzie on the UAE. Do you see decentralized exchanges being authorized for something like real estate anytime soon?
So I would say that it's definitely it's coming. Why do I say that? Because there's a lot of regulated exchanges that have moved their headquarters to the UAE, to Abu Dhabi specifically, and so it's just a natural progression. And I believe I'll get back to you on the point, but there might actually be some already existing. But I know for sure that we have some of the bigger regulated exchanges here, and the UAE is all about facilitating business into the country, and I do think that VAR already has certain licenses that are available for something like that. It might just not be referred to as the same thing.
Thank you. And Maurice, in South Africa, do you have an opinion on the topic?
Yeah, so in South Africa, exchanges is quite interesting. So in the definition of crypto asset, the new regulations that have come in, a NFT, so an ERC 721 is not regarded as a crypto asset. So if you were to create an exchange in South Africa that only dealt with 721s, it falls completely outside of regulation. There is a mechanism to register an exchange in South Africa. That would be a crypto exchange, would be any exchange. If it were to be, let's say, an ERC 20 asset backed exchange, again, it's only if you put third-party products on that exchange that you'd have to register as an exchange. If it were your own products being put on the exchange, you wouldn't necessarily have to register it. So yes, there is regulation in place. If you're an existing exchange in South Africa, you have until the end of November to apply for a license, and pending the outcome of that application, there's an exemption and you can continue trading as an exchange.
Interesting, thanks. And Gary, in the US, I know, we both know some of the ATSs. like T0 or Oasis Pro Markets or Texture Capital or others that are in the space. They're obviously centralized. Do you see decentralized exchanges being authorized anytime soon?
Not necessarily in that regard. I see just mainstream adoption with security tokens like NASDAQ markets, right? Have launched their secured, they're selling Ether tokens, security tokens. So I see it going mainstream with more ATSs popping up that focus on digital securities, like you mentioned, and our main markets here just allowing it to be traded as an asset, differently, which is nice.
Just to come back, just to also mention, in South Africa, I dealt with it as a crypto exchange. The moment you're dealing with securities, you have to apply as a stock exchange. So the moment you fall within the realm of securities, it falls squarely within the definition of a stock exchange, and the requirement in terms of our Financial Markets Act is that you have to register as one.
Yeah, same here.
That's really interesting. So I guess contrary to the US, there's not a lighter license that you can get from the regulator to have a trading venue for secondary trading. You have to be a full exchange, like the equivalent of the NASDAQ or New York Stock Exchange. So that's quite an interesting difference between these jurisdictions. Charles and Fiona, in the UK, what are your thoughts on decentralized exchanges and the likelihood that they would be authorized anytime soon in the UK?
Yeah, so for us, the analysis is a bit different. So generally, the DEXs are not trying to be authorized. They would say that they're not exchanges; they're technology providers. So they are a piece of technology running on a decentralized basis, and therefore, if that's correct, they're outside scope of regulation. The implications of that for bringing security tokens and non-native assets onto them is a practical limitation, but the regulatory analysis is generally on that basis from our side. I think if people are interested, firms like Centrifuge and Goldfinch are interesting around that sort of hybrid between the crypto markets and real-world assets.
Thank you, Charles. And Aurélien, if you've joined, any thoughts on Luxembourg? Or otherwise we can just go to the next question. Oh, yeah, Aurélien.
No, I think in Luxembourg is a bit like the other European jurisdiction. Maybe one thing that I think interesting to mention is that the Luxembourg Stock Exchange offer the possibility to list native tokens, so security tokens, only for debt securities, and only for issuers which are rather institutional issuers, so not for small projects. But I think it's quite an interesting innovation from the Lux Stock Exchange to allow for native tokens to be listed.
Understood. Thank you. So while we're on the topic of decentralized finance, there's another aspect that's very interesting, which is DeFi lending, and people talk a lot about the future benefit of this with regards to real estate, where instead of going to a bank to get a loan off of your home equity, with home equity as your collateral, you could lock those equity tokens in a smart contract and then get a loan from a DeFi loan. So those, I mean, people, I guess, know that this it is only for now a thought for the future, but I was wondering if in your jurisdictions you think that something like this could happen, or if you have any just thoughts on the idea. maybe we can start with Maurice, for example.
It's an interesting question, because in South Africa, crypto isn't regarded as legal tender. But if it was regarded as legal tender, it would contravene our Banks Act, because you'd be taking a deposit. So there's kind of a gap in the law, or a lacuna in the law around that. So I'd say at the moment it would be permissible, but I think there's a gap. The moment they include crypto in the definition of tender, or they amend the definition to include it in relation to certain provisions, you'd need a license, a banking license. And that's what the deposit component. And then the lending component, you'd have to register as a credit provider in South Africa in terms of our national credit provider legislation.
Interesting, thanks. And I'll just ask the panelists to mute if they're not talking. Sometimes there are sounds from the outside. So I guess Charles, on to you. What are your thoughts about DeFi lending with regards to real estate?
Yeah, I guess the interesting question there is the level of investor appetite, because of course lending against real estate is something that the TradFi industry has done very successfully for decades and decades. So I think, as I was saying in the presentation with Fiona, the question is what's additional about that? Is it the basis that there can be new types of investors, or new types of capital, or a new type of structure that's in place, or is it just some functionality that interest can be taken or paid on a more frequent basis, or a more complex calculation around interest? So it's those things. I think that we've got real estate lending. It's the one thing that we've got absolutely nailed down in TradFi, albeit it causes these kind of huge cyclical explosions in the market in the downturn. So I think we will see it for sure. As Gary was saying, there's just broad adoption, and we're seeing all of the experiments now being played out in different ways across all the sectors, and lending and real estate no different.
Just to add, we have actually been approached by an existing, one of the biggest exchanges in South Africa for this very purpose, but that would be traditional lending off the back of taking the tokenized real estate as a pledge, as security. So we actually have put together a model that allows for that. And that involves the layer 2 deeds office that I made mention of, where you can transfer your property rights as a token. And then they can take that token as security. What we've also built into that token, because that trades above the deeds office. So our traditional deeds office, you have the trades of the rights, but we've also incorporated an option. So the owner of the token can actually take transfer in the legacy deeds of the property at any point, should they wish to. But it is something we've considered.
Thank you. And maybe Henzie, on the topic of DeFi loans with real estate as a collateral.
Sure. So that's one of the many beautiful things about the UAE. Like, for example, and I know this isn't exactly what we're talking about, but we have clients that have they have an API which they created, which essentially slots between the bank and then the end user. And they were operating under what we call reg labs. So they're regulatory sandboxes for new ideas that should be regulated in the market. And point being, why I'm saying that is that it took many years of them actually being operational and having that initial regulatory approval before the SCA, which is the federal authority, actually came out with regulations earlier this year to say, no, anyone that's doing this needs federal approval. So when it comes to something like DeFi, or if we're talking about setting up an entity for these types of loan agreements, there is that possibility for people to enter into the market, especially within a reg lab, and actually start providing those services before there becomes a clampdown. And that's just because of the different regulators that we have in play. So even though it doesn't exist to my knowledge currently, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw it sometime soon with the influx of VA clients and Web3 and blockchain that's coming to the region, but also because there's no specific restrictions against a company doing that, especially if they got within a reg lab.
Thank you. Very, very encouraging. Maybe next, Gary on the topic.
Yeah. It depends on, if it's a regular lending product, then it's a debt, kind of a debt security. If you're talking a crypto lending product, geez, BlockFi they just settled charges in 2022 for their unregistered lending product. So, you just don't want to attempt it here with cryptocurrency, but as a security, it's fine. It's just a blockchain representation instead.
Got it. So DEX is in the US, maybe not for right now.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. They BlockFi, Coinbase, BitConnect, Pawnex, everybody. Yeah, they're coming for everybody, and they're still coming.
Got it. Maybe on to Axel in Germany on the topic.
Yeah, my answer is probably along the lines of South Africa, with the one difference that almost every token in Germany is treated as a financial instrument. So actually, it doesn't make a big difference if you trade a security or any other type of token. Most of them, or 99% of them, will be regarded as financial instruments. So you need a license. And the question, if DeFi is okay, no one knows. I said the German supervisory authority is very critical, and I myself, I haven't seen. Well, although we have,
there's a bit of an audio issue, Axel.
Yeah,
it's difficult
in here.
Okay, and I think it's the mic.
Okay.
Or let's continue. Maybe it's better now.
Maybe, yeah. We have reviewed some projects, and none of them has been really DeFi. There's always been a central element in it, and so we only had to say, well, if you offer your services in Germany, you need a license.
Got it. Very clear. Thank you. And Aurélien, have you seen anything happen in Luxembourg with regards to loans with tokenized real estate as a collateral, or do you see that happening anytime soon?
Yeah, it's hard to see the market really evolving very quickly. I think the positive elements that I see, that we have now the blockchain law number 3, which allows for the recording of financial security on the blockchain, and that's clearly likely to give some options. But of course, it depends a bit on how banks, financial institutions, market participants are willing to basically play the game, and so far, at least in the domestic market, it's not that developed.
Understood. Thank you. So on to a next question. I know Maurice mentioned the actual property rights for the real estate, the title on the property, and the deeds office, and all of those topics. So one question that I know I get a lot from prospects, people that are interested in potentially tokenizing, is can they tokenize the title, the actual property right? I know Henzie, for example, said that in the UAE you couldn't tokenize that directly. You have to go through a legal entity, and I think it's pretty similar in many other jurisdictions. So Mike, the question, I guess, is, have you seen of any projects by local governments in your jurisdiction that are working on tokenizing, enabling the tokenization of actual property rights? So is it possible today? Do you see that being possible in the future? Maybe we can start with Gary on this one.
Yeah, it's been done. It's been done, and somewhere on my computer floating around, I've got the very first example of it in the US. But yeah, it's done. And I think some of the states we can eliminate, we want to push to eliminate title companies, or we want to at least update them title companies seem to be, your great grandpa running a file cabinet, blowing the dust off, and stamping it with something and then inking it with his candle. So we're trying to update that system here to make it a little more workable. But yeah, you can. I don't see any reason why in most states you couldn't just do that. It just might not be something that from a business perspective, if you're running a fund or something that you want to do.
Yeah, and another interesting aspect about these, maybe antiquated ways of doing a transaction. I read recently that in France, actually, most of the fees, the notary fees, go to the local governments. I think it's like 15 billion euros for local governments. So there is actually an incentive for them to not move forward in a way with a system that would tokenize the title and that would circumvent the traditional processes. So that's just an interesting fact about France that I read. But yeah, do you have maybe a reaction on that? Or
yeah, I was going to say, there's nothing like that here. That the title companies here, mom and pops, and they're more really just kind of connected by word of mouth to the realtors. So it's just eliminating yet one more slightly unnecessary industry, in my opinion.
Got it. Maybe Axel, on the topic of title and actual property rights in Germany. You're muted, Axel.
Yeah, my apologies. Yeah, I mentioned that in my presentation briefly. For a property title to come up, you need a land registration, and any transfer requires is only performed and effective if it's registered in the land register. So you may create a token that represents something of a title, but that only adds to a second layer of a critical layer, by the way, because if you transfer the token, you need to make sure that the land is transferred as well, because it's just two different pieces of instruments, right? So I haven't seen anyone in Germany who wants to tokenize title. From an economic point of view, I haven't met anyone who's
Axel, I'm sorry. There's an audio issue again. Maybe turning off the video would help. Let's try that. Maybe it's a network issue.
I'll try. Yeah. I haven't met many who want to tokenize and fractionize on property. In Germany, at least. So there is an economic side as well. Legally, it doesn't simply make sense. It doesn't only make sense. It's not allowed. And if you create a title token, it does not represent a title legally. It's some sort of certificate that you may be the owner, the legal owner, but it's not even evidence, clear evidence, right?
Got it. Thank you.
To be registered, then registered.
Got it. Maybe Charles in the UK about how title works over there and if it could be tokenized, maybe, or Fiona.
Fiona's got this one. Here she is.
So from a legal perspective in England, we've got similar restrictions as Axel has just mentioned in terms of land registry. So no more than four persons can be registered on the property title in terms of registration. So we're not seeing and we wouldn't be able to tokenize the kind of property title. That's why in England we tokenize the shares in the entity that owns the real estate. There are, as I mentioned in the presentation, a couple of new models thinking about tokenizing contractual rights relative to property, such as leases rather than title to the property. But at the moment, we're restricted in respect of the land registry rules, and there's no there's no upcoming changes being discussed to relax that or change it.
That's interesting. Tokenizing leases. It's the first time I hear of that. So thank you for that. Maurice. Oh, sorry, Gary.
Oh, sorry, Gabriel. Yeah, I was going to say the California DMV announced just this year that they're going to tokenize DMV car titles. More than 14 million automobiles registered in the state are going to be tokenized. So that's
wow.
I think, yeah,
that's for those outside of for those outside of the U.S. The Department of Motor Vehicles has a certain reputation here, and people generally don't enjoy going there or dealing with the DMV. But it's great to hear that they're forward looking on this. So yeah, thank you. That's super interesting. And so yeah, maybe Maurice on the topic.
Yes, that's I briefly made mention of that in my presentation. What we're very similar to Luxembourg, where we have a deeds registry. It's been around for years, and it's going to be years before they change that. So we had to come up with a structured solution, and it involves we can do it in terms of lease rights, 99-year lease rights, where the lease is actually transferred on the basis that we call it, we create FIDCO 1, Fiduciary Company 1, Fiduciary Company 2. Fiduciary Company 1, let's say it's a bank, takes transfer of the property and holds the property in Fiduciary Company 1. This is the lease structure, and then leases it to Fiduciary Company 2 for on behalf as a principal for as agent for on behalf of an undisclosed principal, and the undisclosed principal is the bearer of the token. So the rights are transferred, and that's where I made mention of the option. If there's an anxiety on the part of the token holder, there's an option built into that, and they can take transfer from FIDCO 1, so from the bank, obviously if they settle the bank. Now, what's nice about that is if the bank lends against that property, they already own the property if there's a default, so there won't be a need for a foreclosure. And that's the model we're working with. The second model is you actually take it into a single alternative investment fund. It gets registered in the name of the general partner, but the secret partners need not be mentioned in the title deed, but it's the secret partner who owns 99.99% of the partnership asset, and you're actually transferring the partnership interest. So we've come up with two modalities.
Got it. Thanks. And Aurélien, in Luxembourg, are people looking at tokenizing titles, the actual title? What's your perspective?
No, I think exactly like just mentioned by my colleague in Germany. So similar approach with intermediation, with investment vehicle, investment funds, or other type of structure, but not directly the titles on the real estate side.
Got it. And Henzie, I believe you said in your presentation that this wasn't done in the UAE, correct? That you had to go through an entity.
Yeah, there's too many moving parts here because there's so many authorities that regulate real estate. So we would have to get everyone around a round table, including RERA and the land department. Then we'd have to get like compliance and legal. So it would have to be a top-down approach where everyone sits around the table, actually figures out all of the processes and procedures involved, and then we could start looking at doing more of that in actual ownership and stuff in real estate. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks. Yeah, looking forward to the day where local governments issue, for example, an NFT that represents the title, the property right for their real estate, maybe in a decade or so, hopefully before. So yeah, on to the next topic. Something that prospects and clients mention a lot on calls is the choice of blockchain. So people come to us and have a lot of questions. Should I tokenize on Ethereum? Because most of the ecosystem seems to be gravitating around that blockchain. Others come from a different point of view, saying that they think they should use permissioned chains. So contrary to Ethereum, to interact with the actual chain, you would need to be KYC'd, and so it's a less of an open system. So what, from the perspective of your jurisdiction, what would be your answer to someone that is thinking of the choice of blockchain to tokenize their real estate? Maybe we can start with Axel.
Can you pass the question on? I'm still struggling with my Wi-Fi, I'm afraid.
Okay. Yeah. The question was the debate between the choice of blockchain. So particularly permissioned versus permissionless blockchains. Like what would you advise people to do in Germany in terms of choosing a blockchain to tokenize?
Yeah, that's a very good question indeed. We see, of course, Ethereum is the blockchain of choice, or derivatives of Ethereum like Polygon. The question between private and public blockchain has not been answered yet. What we frequently discuss is if a public blockchain meets the GDPR requirements in Europe. Right? This is the biggest topic. So I have seen both models, but which one is really compliant is not settled yet. So for the sake of safety, I would probably recommend a private blockchain.
Interesting, thank you. Maybe Henzie in the UAE, what are you advising people to think of when it comes to choosing a blockchain?
I would agree with Axel's initial assessment in terms of just private choice. When we're talking about KYC requirements, or as you were saying, like a blockchain in terms of safety, KYC, and all of those things, businesses operating here do have certain requirements that they have to meet in those regards, and that varies as well based on sector or services provided. So I think insofar as it's a blockchain that can sufficiently satisfy those requirements, then it would be more so of an internal decision that they would make. But from an outside perspective, as Axel was saying, obviously the private ones could be considered safer, right? So.
Interesting. Gary, in the US?
Yeah, I think the answer is it depends, right? There's pros and cons to both. And as I mentioned earlier, the Utah legislation requires a public permission blockchain, which to me seemed a little odd. But, it depends. For security reasons, a private permission chain may have more exposure because it's more centralized, right? There's less nodes running on it. So as far as like from I'm a technical guy, as far as a 51% attack kind of a thing taking over, it's got a little more potential for that. With the private chain, obviously, like I said, you can KYC AML, but I think with your system, you can still, like with DigiShares, you can still KYC AML people and put them on a public chain. And you can still write in a 1404 standard on Ethereum for holding periods, so that token can't be transferred, outside of our 12-month holding period for Rule 144, for example. So the public chain in that regard can be workable when it's interfaced with those extra systems to do the KYC AML while we're onboarding. It's still quite useful. So yeah, the answer is both, and it's kind of a look at what risk assessment and what system they want to use at the time. So
that's a really interesting point. And yeah, I think we're in the US, a lot of institutions, like Wall Street banks, are looking or actually have created their own private chains. And I've definitely heard from the mouth of people within top Wall Street banks saying that they weren't enabled to do permissionless chains yet for tokenization, but a lot of the other players are doing permissionless. And I think a lot of European banks, like French banks, issuing on bonds on Ethereum. So it'll be interesting. But Maurice, in South Africa, what's your perspective on this?
It depends. If you're transferring a single asset, it's got to be private, because somebody's got to make sure that all the taxes, everything's been paid up, rates and tax have been paid prior to transfer. And that's an obligation by somebody to make sure of that. On the fractionalized asset model, our view is permissionless. The KYC obligation is really on the primary exchange, but on the secondary markets, it's out of our hands, or our clients' hands when it comes to it. And we want our clients to have the ability to actually transfer the assets between MetaMasks outside of an exchange. The gas fees are an issue depending on assets, the ticket sizes. If you're going with very, very low ticket sizes, you obviously want a chain with very, very low gas fees. So that's the direction we're heading in.
Super interesting, thanks. And Fiona, from the UK's perspective?
Sure, nothing too much more to add in terms of the initial comments on permission versus permissionless in terms of AML and securities rules, and concerns predominantly from a TradFi perspective with that regard. But the only point to add from UK is that in terms of if you can tokenize the whole of a share rather than just the economic rights, the report issued this year found that if it was a fully decentralized and permissionless blockchain, then that couldn't be used as a shareholder register. But they did say that a permission system could be. So that may be a factor in the considerations.
That's really interesting. And Henzie, did I go to you on this topic or not? Yes. All right. Sorry. So really interesting. Very different perspectives from the regulators in different areas. Utah seems to be an outlier, but I know that a lot of thinkers on the topic in the US favor permissionless chains, even though that you could have a layer on top to ensure the KYC, of course, in AML. So it'll be very interesting to see what chain and standards succeed. Maybe a last question or set of questions from the perspective of with regards to the regulators in your jurisdiction. What are your hopes for the next year or so, or in the medium term, as to what will happen to help people in their real estate tokenization projects? Maybe we can start with Maurice.
At the moment, as I mentioned, our environment is pretty friendly in this space. What I do believe is necessary is the gaps that I made mention of. They do need to be regulated. I think that regulation is coming in about 3 years' time, but it's not going to be serious. It's going to be registering in terms of Financial Services Conduct Authority. What I would like to see is our deeds registry formally moving away from the current system. The reason I say that in South Africa, it's the attorneys as conveyancers who transfer the properties. And we're talking minimum $2,500 per transfer. Now, we're living in a world where you do not actually need the attorneys to attend to those transfers. Yes, there's certain checks and balances, but those checks and balances ought not come with that fee. So if we can eliminate that, and there are a lot of colleagues of mine who hate me for saying this, but if we can eliminate that, I think it would do a lot for our society, and certainly it would be a cost saving in relation to costs that in this day and age are completely unnecessary. So yeah, we'd love that.
Thank you. Axel, on the topic.
Yeah, I have a little more fears than hopes with our regulator, although in general, BaFin is competent on blockchain issues. So there's a good discussion, but still, the whole idea as we see it is to basically reflect the MiFID structure now for tokens. Now they have to digest MiCA, but MiCA is following the lines of MiFID. And so we basically try to press the blockchain use cases into the old system. And it will work somehow. MiCA will work. Security tokens will work somehow. But if there is any innovation that remains, this is the big question. Because I mean, the better side of the coin is that we can use the structures, and we have the market structure, the infrastructure, which is good. But on the other hand, I see a number of my blockchain friends who are really desperate because they see that really innovative ideas like
Axel, I'm sorry,
DeFi,
we really it's very hard to hear.
So bad,
maybe without video.
Sorry. I stopped my video. Yeah, what we see is that really innovative ideas like DeFi, for example, do not move forward. We try to regulate everything in the old way, in the old system and the old infrastructure. So we have digital representatives, but nothing has changed. And especially the idea of taking out intermediaries, I don't see that happen. In fact, we have more intermediaries. We have crypto security registers. We have crypto custodians. We have a lot more intermediaries, and not less. And actually, that's sad because it used to be it used to be a very innovative technology, and regulation is putting it into something old.
Very, very interesting to hear. Hopefully things will turn for the better in Germany. Thank you. And Fiona,
it's not Germany only, it's Europe.
Europe as a whole. Yeah.
MiFID, and MiFID is old school, if you like.
Yeah, understood. And yeah, Fiona in the UK, any hopes?
I think keep pushing on with various test cases, which will test the boundaries of our existing laws. As I mentioned, we're working with the existing framework as it relates to real estate and shares, rather than interposing any specific blockchain or digital securities laws. So I think more test cases will push the boundaries in terms of what's possible, which should pave the way for others, or a point in time where it becomes clear there is a desire or requirement to amend the existing law to cater for a particular scenario. But at the moment, as Charles mentioned, the kind of real estate funding and real estate transactions are still the kind of preserve of TradFi in that regard, and the rules in respect of shares and essentially mirroring existing provisions as you would a traditional share issue have some limitations.
Thank you. And Henzie in the UAE?
Thanks, Gabriel. I think here it's not so much what hopes we have, it's just when those hopes will materialize, because it's all coming. We see new and new regulations or new and new possibilities opening up in the market on a constant basis, and so more and more is becoming possible here. And I think it's more so here about if you have a good project, if you have the right people behind it, like strategic people from within the country, it definitely helps get things done. But I am, like, for example, we're currently in discussions with the land department because we have various projects that have come by our desk and clients that we're working with. So it's yeah, so yes, okay, hopes are that we'll have a securities regulation ensue, and that there will be tokenization of real estate, all of those things that will be available shortly. But again, in my mind, it's not so much wishes, it's whens, because it's all in the pipeline. I mean, just to end, even for example, like the regulatory authority of Dubai came out with a quotation earlier, was it this year or last year? But they said that they wanted to make Dubai like the new economy in terms of AI, blockchain, Web3, metaverse, and cryptocurrencies. So I did Web3, blockchain together. But so I think there's a lot of hope for the next few months.
That's great to hear. Very encouraging. And Gary, in the US, whether the state or federal level, what would you like to see happen?
Yeah, I mean, as far as our securities law and tokenization goes, I'm happy. I think I'm very happy with the states, Delaware, Wyoming, the legislation coming in Utah, New Hampshire. I'm very pleased with it. We have very much regulatory certainty on the side of tokenizing real estate from a securities perspective. From the angle of, stable coins and cryptocurrency, I do hope that the stablecoin, the TUMI legislation passes and that we have at least some certainty there. So when we're interfacing stable coins with this, and then in the future, if you want to, interface cryptocurrency, there's at least some certainty that things won't fall through the cracks. But otherwise, we're good here, and everything else is up and coming with the other states filling in the gaps with their own DAO LLCs.
Understood. Thank you. Perfect. Well, I guess we'll wrap up. Thank you to all the speakers and panelists. This was a really informative webinar, and yeah, we'll see you on the next DigiShares webinar.